We are so glad you were joining us for this deep dive today.
Yeah, really excited to get into this one. It's a heavy topic.
It really is. Okay, so let's unpack this right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Think about when you take out the trash, right?
Right.
It doesn't just, cease to exist. It goes to a landfill. It physically occupies space somewhere else.
Mm.
And the same principle applies to water. It evaporates, it condenses, and then it rains down.
Exactly, yeah. The water cycle.
Right. Matter and energy are constantly just, changing addresses.
Yeah.
So track with me here. If a healer supposedly pulls a terminal illness, like a literal physical mass of dark, decaying energy, or even a crushing psychological weight out of a dying human body.
Where does it go?
Exactly. Where does it go? Does it just vanish into the ether? Have you ever wondered what happens to the collateral damage of human compassion?
I mean, in the classical scientific model, we don't even acknowledge the premise of that question,
Right, because science says it's just biology.
Yeah, exactly. The illness is a pathogen or a cellular mutation, right? Like a chemical imbalance. It is neutralized by medicine or starved by treatments or just defeated by your immune system's white blood cells. It isn't moved in some metaphysical sense.
It's just destroyed.
Or dismantled, yeah. But in the experiential esoteric practices, specifically the ones we are looking at today, that illness is viewed as a heavy, tangible frequency. An energy.
And energy has rules.
Right. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred.
Wow.
Which means someone or, something has to absorb that impact.
And that brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. Because we are exploring an incredibly intense, like almost unbelievable firsthand account from a highly specialized source.
Yeah, it's a fascinating perspective.
It really is. It's a transcript and a collection of works from a creator known as Osman, also widely known as the blind Muslim yogi.
Right, Oz?
We're going to look at the hidden and, frankly, perilous personal costs of energy healing. Because Osman isn't just claiming to, facilitate healing from some safe, detached distance.
He's in the trenches.
Exactly. He claims he is literally trading his own life force, his wealth, and his physical health to save strangers from critical illnesses. He is essentially acting as the human landfill for disease.
Which, this creates a profound tension for us to navigate today. On one side, we have empirical medical science, which relies on measurable, repeatable data.
Like double-blind studies and biological mechanisms.
Exactly, stuff you can see under a microscope. And on the other side, we have Osman's experiential reality. And while we are exploring his personal beliefs and his phenomenological experience of the world, we have to acknowledge that his account aggressively challenges our conventional understanding of biology.
Oh, absolutely.
It challenges causality and, frankly, basic human self-preservation. It asks you to consider if empathy can actually become a lethal weapon against yourself.
I mean, if energy transfer is an unbending law of thermodynamics, like you were saying, the person absorbing that disease must have an incredibly anomalous biological and psychological makeup.
They'd have to, yeah.
Because who exactly has the hardware to process that level of toxic energy without just dying instantly? So let's look at the man at the center of this source material.
Let's do it.
Osman introduces himself as a bioenergy healer on a master level.
Awesome.
And he is very clear that he doesn't just do light wellness work. He isn't just doing a little weekend Reiki.
No, not at all.
He explicitly states he has telepathic healing capabilities using the principles of quantum entanglement.
Which is a huge claim.
Huge. And he specializes in critical care recovery and terminal illnesses. We're talking about severe physiological, psychological, and spiritual ailments that have stumped traditional medicine.
The timeline of his practice is what immediately demands attention, I think. He notes that he has been practicing this art form, this healing and advanced yoga and meditation, for 50 years.
50 years.
Half a century. And he attained his first samadhi experience by the age of 19.
Which is mind-blowing. For those who don't know, samadhi is like the ultimate state of meditative consciousness. Hitting that at 19 is wild.
It's a half century of unbroken focus on the unseen architecture of the human body.
And he hasn't just localized his study to one specific dogma either. That's what I find so interesting. He describes studying globally under great masters from the Far East, the Middle East, and the West.
And we really have to look at the specific differences in those esoteric traditions to understand his baseline.
Right, because they are very different.
Exactly. In the Far East, particularly in traditional Chinese medicine and yogic sciences, Bioenergy is viewed as ki, or prana, right?
Yeah.
It's a life force traveling through highly specific meridians or nadis. It's an internal circulatory system of light and breath.
I always think of it like an intricate subway map of the human nervous system.
That's a great analogy. And then you have Middle Eastern traditions, particularly Sufi esoteric healing,
Yeah.
which often focuses on the subtle centers of consciousness, heavily tied to spiritual purity, divine connection, and the heart center.
But then he brings in Western methodologies too, and he's very explicit about this. He is looking at this through a scientific lens.
Yes, a purely scientific approach.
Right, not some archaic or purely mystical approach, but evaluating outcomes, failure rates, biological responses. He is looking at this through multiple historically isolated lenses.
It's so rare to see someone bridge those gaps. Like if you listen to the Huberman Lab with Professor Andrew Huberman, he talks endlessly about the scientific mechanics of the nervous system, neuroplasticity, and stress responses for
Oh yeah, Huberman is great at breaking down the biology of breath work and focus.
Exactly. And Osman is essentially applying that rigorous scientific mindset to esoteric energy practices. He's taking the mysticism out and looking at the mechanics.
I guess if we think about it mechanically, he's spent 50 years learning the back-end source code of the human bioenergetic field.
The source code, yeah.
Like, he's pulling from completely different operating systems. The Eastern system might use a different coding language than the Middle Eastern or Western systems, but they are all trying to execute the exact same program: human survival.
And optimization.
Right. He's identifying where the code overlaps to find out what actually works, stripping away the cultural dressing.
And that synthesis points to a deeply pragmatic approach. Osman is attempting to create a results-oriented protocol. Because, if you spend 50 years focusing entirely on the unseen bioenergetic fields of the human body, your definition of health fundamentally alters.
You would have to.
A standard medical practitioner is trained to look at the hardware, the tissue, the blood, the bones. Osman is looking entirely at the software, the energetic currents driving the hardware.
He's looking for efficiency in an art form that is usually associated with slow, lifelong asceticism. Like, he wants to achieve results in as easy a method as possible.
Which is why his success rate is reportedly so high. Because he practices rigorously, sometimes 18 hours a day in the past, and currently 8 to 10 hours a day just to, as he says, sharpen the sword.
8 to 10 hours a day. That is a full-time job just maintaining his internal state.
Right. And he makes a very important distinction here that we need to highlight. He offers his services on a complementary basis.
Yes, this is crucial.
He explicitly states this is not a replacement for the medical fields, but something to enhance whatever is lacking in other medical fields. His services are not a replacement for medical treatment.
And because of that intense dedication and that high success rate over 50 years, his treatments and consultations are not inexpensive.
They're a premium service.
Exactly. It's an energy healing service at a premium level. But he also gives away so much for free. He directs people to his website, yogawellness786.com, and his YouTube channel, where he offers extensive, unique advice and techniques completely for free.
He doesn't hold anything back on the free channels.
No, he really doesn't. You can find him on Apple Podcasts and Spotify too. Just search for The Blind Muslim Yogi. But if you want the one-on-one consultation, the actual active energy healing, that's what the paid Patreon and premium services are for.
Which makes sense. I mean, if he has supposedly hacked the system to make it efficient, you're paying for 50 years of condensed mastery.
Right. But, and this is the big but, if he has this all figured out, why does the source material pivot into such a catastrophic description of his own life?
This is the crazy part.
This is where the story shifts from a profile of mastery to the grim economics of energy transfer. Because he frames this work as a literal transaction, a brutal exchange of highly valuable currency.
The word economics perfectly captures the dynamic he describes. What's fascinating here is that Osman explains that energy healing, especially at the critical care level, is not just a passive channeling of universal light.
It's not just sending good vibes.
Yeah. Not at all. It involves actively absorbing the negative energy from the patient. If a patient is dying of a severe infection, the energetic frequency of that infection has a literal mass, a weight.
And for the patient to be unburdened, the healer has to take the weight onto their own subtle body.
Exactly. And the mathematical cost he calculates for doing this is severe. He estimates that his practice is reducing his lifespan by a minimum of 20 years.
20 years.
He states that if he was biologically supposed to live to 80, he's chopped it down to 60.
just willingly giving up 2 decades of life.
And the psychological framing of this is staggering. He says, quote, "If I die in the next few days or hours, I don't mind because I went in with my eyes open."
Wow. It is an ultimate expression of pathological altruism.
Yeah, in clinical psychology, pathological altruism is defined as behavior, where a person's desire to help others is taken to such an extreme that it causes profound, irrational harm to themselves.
Like the mother who stops eating so her kids can have her portions even if they can find other food, and she eventually starves herself to death.
Right. In Osman's paradigm, he is sacrificing his own baseline biological stability for the survival of strangers. The desire to heal totally eclipses the biological imperative to survive.
But the collateral damage extends way beyond his biological lifespan. He talks about what he calls bad luck. And we aren't talking about missing a flight or stubbing a toe.
No, extreme personal losses.
He details losing everything. 6 divorces, the loss of hundreds of millions in business capital. He mentions one specific business that took 17 years of hard work to build, and he lost it entirely.
It reminds me of the conversation Stephen Bartlett has on the Diary of a CEO podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen frequently talks with founders about the profound psychological and physical toll of building a business for decades, how it destroys marriages and health.
Right, but take that baseline entrepreneurial burnout and multiply it by 1,000.
Exactly, because Osman believes the negative energetic residue of the illnesses he cures actually clings to him. This dense, chaotic energy disrupts the harmonious frequencies of his own life.
It manifests outward as financial ruin and relationship collapse. The chaos of the disease becomes the chaos of his reality. He describes periods of being entirely broke, living in near destitution, and having hardly any friends left.
I guess if we look at this practically, outside of the esoteric explanation, it still tracks completely.
How so?
Well, think about the cognitive overload. If you are actively draining your baseline cellular energy to cure a terminal patient, you literally don't have the prefrontal cortex bandwidth left to balance a ledger, manage employees, or maintain a marriage.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
If you are vibrating at the frequency of a life or death crisis every single day, the mundane tasks of maintaining a multi-million-dollar business or, being emotionally present for a spouse, they just become impossible.
It's not necessarily a supernatural curse, it's catastrophic neurological burnout.
Right.
Look at standard medical doctors, oncologists, trauma surgeons. They suffer from intense compassion fatigue and high divorce rates, and they are protected by institutional boundaries.
Right, they get to clock out and go home. Osman has no boundaries. He is internalizing the trauma directly. The bad luck is the inevitable systemic failure of a human life spread way beyond its sustainable limits.
And even if you aren't doing bioenergy healing, think about the concept of energy vampires in your own life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We all have that one colleague or family member who leaves you feeling physically exhausted. You need a nap after just a 10-minute conversation with them.
Now scale that physiological drain up to a lethal terminal degree. That's what Osman is voluntarily walking into every time he takes a case.
Which forces us to look at the physical limits of the human body when subjected to that scale of energy transfer. The source material provides a really harrowing account of what happens when those limits are breached.
The incident in Turkey.
Yes, the Turkey incident. Osman reckons a specific period when he was living alone in an apartment in Turkey. He takes on 3 critical care patients simultaneously.
3 at once.
And he admits, with full self-awareness, that he knew it was incredibly dangerous. He says his bioenergetic capacity was only sufficient to safely handle 1 patient. But the desperation of the families, he just couldn't find the heart to say no to the other 2.
The resulting physical toll is deeply disturbing. He describes the aftermath of those healing sessions, leaving him completely bedridden for 2 weeks.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it strips away all the glamorous, sanitized imagery we associate with modern wellness. It's not all incense and soft lighting.
Of the battlefield.
Literal battlefield. He was alone. He describes being entirely unable to walk, having to drag himself on his elbows across the floor, leaning against the wall just to pull his body weight up to reach the toilet.
He was surviving solely on tiny sips of bottled water that happened to be within arm's reach. He was essentially experiencing massive systemic organ failure without a traceable pathogen.
And out of those 3 critical care patients, the energy he expended saved 2 of them, but he lost 1.
He notes the heavy psychological burden of that loss, wondering if his energy hadn't been divided 3 ways, maybe he could have saved the 3rd.
But this incident actually pales in comparison to the most shocking physical sacrifice detailed in his account.
The loss of his eyesight.
Yes, he states that he lost his left eye after healing a patient with a severe viral illness that was entirely unresponsive to traditional antibiotics. He says he felt the infection literally transfer from the patient's body into his own head.
He felt it move.
Yeah, manifesting as this severe localized headache. And then he subsequently lost his right eye after taking on another critical care recovery. He is now completely irreversibly blind, hence the name, the blind Muslim yogi.
Here is where we really must rigorously examine the divide between empirical medical science and phenomenological experience. Osman is very transparent about this part.
Right, he doesn't hide the medical opinion.
Exactly. He notes that traditional medical science relying on empirical evidence, physical examinations, and measurable biological data attributes his blindness to an adverse, rare reaction to the COVID vaccine.
And from a medical standpoint, that requires exploration. If empirical science is looking at a man who undergoes immense life-threatening stress, working 18-hour days, neglecting his own basic needs, the body will break down.
There is well-documented medical precedent for stress-induced physiological collapse. In the medical literature, we see conditions like somatic symptom disorder or functional neurological symptom disorder, often called conversion disorder.
What exactly is conversion disorder?
It's where severe psychological or emotional stress physically converts into neurological symptoms. This can include blindness, paralysis, or non-epileptic seizures. The brain's hardware is completely intact, but the software shuts down due to extreme trauma.
So from the perspective of a neurologist or an ophthalmologist, an adverse autoimmune reaction or a severe psychogenic vision loss caused by unimaginable stress is the factual, observable diagnosis.
Right, but Osman firmly, unequivocally rejects the vaccine explanation.
He does. He believes it is the direct, undeniable energetic toll of the healing process. He felt the transference. He experienced the timing of the headache perfectly aligning with the extraction of the vital energy from the patient.
This really highlights the core philosophical problem of epistemology. How do we know what we know? Western medicine relies entirely on external observation and measurable consensus. If it can't be measured by an instrument or replicated in a lab, it doesn't objectively exist.
But Osman relies entirely on internal phenomenology, the first-person, subjective experience of reality. To him, the visceral sensation of the disease moving into his optic nerve is far more real than any doctor's chart.
And again, what's crucial to point out is that Osman isn't universally hostile to medicine. He is very pro-science.
Right, he explicitly notes his therapies are not a replacement for medical treatment. He operates alongside standard care.
Yeah.
But the psychological resilience required to wake up permanently blind in a dark world and still possess the mental framing to believe it was a worthy trade because strangers got to live.
It's almost incomprehensible to the modern mind.
It demands an inquiry into how such a profound, dangerous art is transmitted to others. Like, if the cost of mastery is blindness, bankruptcy, and decades shaved off your life, how does a master approach teaching the next generation?
You'd think his first lesson would be a giant warning sign, run away.
Exactly. But his approach to teaching is surprisingly critical of the very people you'd expect to be his peers. He heavily critiques what he calls scholarly yoga teachers.
He talks about practitioners who spend their lives memorizing the theory of yoga, learning the Sanskrit texts, but who completely lack any actual experiential power.
It's a classic friction point between academia and actual practitioners. He humorously points out that these scholars often can't even pronounce the terms correctly.
Like anulum vilom.
Yes, anulum vilum, which is an alternate nostril breathing technique. He says these highly theoretical teachers stumble over classifications like Nadi Shuddhana, completely missing the energetic mechanism because they are so focused on the terminology.
Let's actually pause and look at that mechanism because it explains why he's so frustrated with the scholars. Alternate nostril breathing isn't just about getting oxygen into the lungs.
Right.
In yogic science, it's about balancing the left and right hemispheres of the brain. You are actively syncing the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems.
The right nostril is tied to the Pingala Nadi, right?
Yeah.
The sun or active energy.
Exactly. And the left is tied to the Ida Nadi, the moon, or cooling energy. When a scholar just treats it as a mild breathing exercise, they miss the fact that they're supposed to be manually operating their own neurological circuit board.
And because he understands the circuit board intimately, his core teaching philosophy is stated plainly.
Mhm.
An ounce of practice is worth tons of theory.
He suffered through decades of trial and error to figure out how to operate that board. He mentions that it took him roughly 22 years of intense asceticism to achieve a genuine out-of-body experience.
22 years.
22 years of wasting time, as he puts it, on nonsense that didn't yield practical results.
And because of that wasted time, his entire focus as a teacher is giving his students shortcuts. He claims that through his synthesized scientific methods, his students can learn to control Kundalini energy and achieve out-of-body experiences in just 1 to 2 days.
To understand the gravity of that claim, we need to define Kundalini energy.
Yeah, please do. It's a term thrown around a lot, but what is it actually?
In esoteric anatomy, Kundalini is a highly potent foundational bioenergy. It's described as a coiled serpent resting at the base of the spine, the root chakra.
Right.
When awakened, this energy travels violently up the central channel of the spine, the Sushumna Nadi, piercing the other chakras until it reaches the crown of the head.
Resulting in profound spiritual awakening.
Or, if uncontrolled, severe psychological and physical destabilization.
Which is terrifying.
Correct.
I mean, you look at cases described by people like Gopi Krishna, who famously documented his own spontaneous, terrifying Kundalini awakening that almost killed him.
Yes, Gopi Krishna is a perfect example.
Or the clinical work of Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, who actually treated people going through spiritual emergencies because their nervous systems couldn't handle the Kundalini voltage.
Rick Archer talks about this all the time on his podcast, Buddha at the Gas Pump. He interviews people who have these sudden awakenings, and it's not always peaceful. It can be a massive nervous system overload.
So taking that into account, Osman's shortcut is a huge deal. It's less like handing someone the keys to a fast car and more like taking a standard 120-volt household lamp and plugging it directly into a high-voltage nuclear grid.
That's a great way to put it. Without the 20 years of asceticism acting as a transformer to step that energy down, doesn't the student's psychological wiring simply melt?
Exactly. If Osman, a grandmaster, lost his eyesight and his wealth managing these energies, is it really safe to give a novice a 48-hour fast track to awakening Kundalini?
That is the paramount danger of democratizing esoteric knowledge. The traditional decades-long path of asceticism isn't just about learning the technique, it's about building the psychological scaffolding necessary to handle the technique without losing your mind.
If you shortcut the technique, you bypass the scaffolding entirely.
But Osman provides a fascinating historical perspective on why this knowledge was hidden in the first place. He explains that it wasn't just to protect the student, but to protect society.
Right, he reveals that much of this ancient knowledge was deliberately suppressed or lost because it was historically weaponized.
Weaponized.
Yeah, he notes it was used in military warfare to empower soldiers, to create ninjas, as he describes it.
The militarization of esoteric practices is a well-documented historical reality. In various cultures, warrior monks and martial ascetics, from the Shaolin Temple to the samurai integrating Zen, or certain Rajput warriors in India, utilized extreme yogic and meditative practices.
To make themselves better killers.
Essentially, yes. The ability to control the nervous system, to suppress the biological panic response to pain, to harness sudden explosive bursts of cellular energy. That makes an incredibly lethal soldier.
Which makes total sense. The exact same intense energetic focus used by Osman to pull a terminal virus out of a dying patient is the same focus a warrior would use to strike a lethal blow without hesitation.
The power itself is entirely neutral. The application dictates its morality.
This perfectly explains why ancient masters hid the shortcuts. You don't hand out the blueprints to a biological weapon of mass destruction to just anyone.
Exactly. And you see this deep reverence for the power in classic texts, too. If you read Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, or study the teachings of Swami Sivananda, Swami Vivekananda, or Ramakrishna, they all revere this energy.
Oh, absolutely.
They understood that accessing these states isn't a parlor trick. It's fundamentally altering your interaction with reality. It's like what Rainn Wilson explores on his Soul Boom podcast when he talks about the deep necessity for spiritual revolution, but grounding it in true wisdom.
The duality of power is central to understanding Osman's mission. He believes we're in an era where the benefits of releasing this knowledge outweigh the risks.
But this raises the ultimate question about his own trajectory. He is 57 years old. He calculates he has given up at least 2 decades of his biological lifespan. He is entirely blind, and he has lost his accumulated wealth.
Where does a person operating at that deficit go from there? You'd expect complete resignation, a quiet retirement into obscurity.
Just fading away.
Right. But instead, the source material reveals a relentless, almost fierce determination. Despite the poverty and physical degradation, Osman continues to practice and teach. Because as he states, he cannot count how many lives he has saved live that traditional methods simply could not help.
He states plainly and without regret, it was worth the sacrifice.
Which is just, wow.
But he isn't passively accepting an early death. This is where his scientific results-oriented mind merges with ancient alchemy.
What's he doing?
Osman is actively researching what he calls the elixir of life and the deathless body. He is attempting to increase his own energetic capacity to what he terms a grandmaster level.
It sounds like mythology, but within the context of his life, it's just the next logical protocol. He's trying to upgrade his hardware to survive the software he's running.
It presents an extraordinary paradox. He is simultaneously hurtling toward an early death by literally giving his life force away to 6 strangers while frantically searching for the esoteric keys to biological immortality.
And crucially, he isn't seeking the deathless body out of ego, vanity, or a fear of death.
No, not at all.
He is seeking it to create a larger, undrainable reservoir of energy. He wants to prolong his life for the sole purpose of having more time and energy to give away to the dying.
Unbelievable.
And while he's working on cracking the code to that grandmaster level, he is sharing his foundational knowledge openly. He hopes that his efforts will help to revive a very ancient and lost science, which could benefit current society tremendously.
Improving their life in every aspect: health, peace of mind, social life, relationships, finances.
Exactly. Like we said, he points the audience to his free 5-minute yoga and meditation program at yogawellness786.com. He's hoping to help others learn to protect themselves energetically and achieve baseline results efficiently, without the dangers he faced.
He's essentially doing the extreme, dangerous beta testing on his own body and soul, taking the catastrophic hits so that everyday people can safely interact with these forces.
You know, it reminds me of the conversations you hear on the Mel Robbins podcast or Lewis Howes on the School of Greatness, where they talk about doing the internal work to reset your nervous system so you can show up better for the world.
Or even folks like Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra talking about mastering your state and your energy.
Right, but Osman is doing the literal, physical manifestation of that concept at the edge of human survivability.
He believes there are millions of latent energy healers in the world. If he can achieve this grandmaster level, if he can create a sustainable protocol that doesn't actively destroy the healer in the process, it could revolutionize the safety and efficacy of alternative care globally.
We've covered an immense amount of ground today. We've looked at the intense, high-stakes dichotomy of Osman, the blind Muslim yogi.
We really have.
We have the profound, life-saving capabilities of his energy work placed on a scale against staggering, almost unimaginable personal costs. Lost wealth, the loss of his eyesight, and a significantly shortened lifespan.
And while you, the listener, may not be attempting critical care bioenergy healing or pulling viral infections out of terminal patients, the underlying mechanics of energy exchange apply directly to your everyday life.
They really do. The conversations you have, the environments you place yourself in, the emotional labor you take on for your friends and family, they all require a tangible, energetic transaction.
You are constantly absorbing and expending unseen emotional and psychological mass.
It brings us all the way back to the concept of the landfill from the beginning of our deep dive.
The waste has to go somewhere.
Exactly. The compassion you give costs you something. So we want to leave you with a thought experiment to mull over.
Imagine you were handed a metaphysical bank account today.
And in this account is the absolute sum of your own life force, your remaining days on Earth. And you knew with mathematical certainty exactly how many days of your own life it would cost to cure a complete stranger of a terminal illness.
Where would you draw the line?
Would you give away 1 year of your life to save 2 strangers? Would you trade your eyesight to save a child you've never met?
It forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question.
What is the actual biological currency of human compassion?
It has been a deeply thought-provoking journey exploring these accounts with you today.
Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning the unseen.